So a quick thank you to our sponsor, Careerist, before we dive into today's episode. Because not everyone wants to spend their time learning how to code to get that elusive career in tech. And with Careerist QA Bootcamp, you don't have to. In just 4 months, you can have live training, a remote internship, and a career coaching that sets you up for success. Because in a world of job layoffs, QA is one of the fastest growing fields in tech. And there are currently 37,000 openings in the US right now, and with salaries up to $105,000. And Careerist grads, they're working at companies in 42 states, and with a very highly respectable 4.7 star Trustpilot rating, I think it's clear the model seems to work. And remember, if you don't land a job within a year, you get your tuition fees back. So what's the catch? Well, the only catch really is that the seats for the next class won't last. So you'll find the link in the show notes. Check it out. Let me know how you get on. Maybe I can get you on the podcast when you get that career in tech and tell me about your journey. But now it's time to get straight into the discussion with my guest today. Have you ever wondered what's really holding companies back? Holding them back from making the most of AI and data-driven innovation? Well, today I'm joined by Manish Sood. He's the founder and CEO of Reltio, a company helping some of the world's biggest brands rethink the way that they use data. And we'll also be talking about real-time intelligence, the hidden costs of data debt, and why the role of the data steward is transforming into one of the most important enablers of AI. And with that seemed perfectly set, let's get my guest onto the podcast now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Manish Sood, founder and CEO at Reltio. I started Reltio in 2011, and since then we have been building and growing the business, focused on data unification in the enterprise. That's a key need these days across the enterprise, given the state of the enterprise, where you see so many different applications, so many different silos of information. There is a need for a system of context, especially as AI capabilities are being adopted. And that's what we provide to our customers across a wide variety of industries.
And I think I should highlight for people that are hearing about Reltio for the very first time, you work with brands from L'Oreal, Pfizer, HP, and CarMax, to name but a few there. So can you name or maybe give a concrete example of how upgrading to real-time data management has maybe transformed a company's customer experience, fraud prevention, supply chain operations, or anything, just to give people listening an idea of the kind of value add that we're talking about here, because there's a big focus on ROI of every tech project now. So is there anything that springs to mind?
I can share a few. And you mentioned CarMax. That's one of our customers that we work with very closely. If you look at their business, their whole business is trying to make sure that they can deliver a significantly differentiated experience in an antiquated industry of buying and selling used cars and servicing them. And their guarantee, I'm sure you have bought cars and sold cars. Their guarantee is that the customer experience that they will deliver will allow you to complete the transaction in 15 minutes or less. And no haggling needed. What they are able to do is, if you go to their website, punch in the VIN number or the vehicle identification number or the license plate number, they will instantaneously generate a quote for what price they're going to buy your car at. And that is the price that they will end up transacting at after you bring it into the location where you're going to hand over the keys to them. They'll do their inspection, but more or less, it's that exact same price that they will pay you. The reason why they're able to do it is because they have gathered all of the information about every vehicle that is there in the US through inspection reports, through accident reports, through lots of other opportunities that they may have had in the past to inspect a particular vehicle. All of that data is combined in Reltio to create a 360-degree view of the vehicle. And then they have an AI model that is looking at current market conditions and trends and inputs from various other sources to generate that quote that is going to be the price at which you're going to transact in 15 minutes or less. That's how they're able to use that information as a key strategic asset to drive this kind of experience. Let's shift to another industry. In the insurance industry, we work with Liberty Mutual as a customer, one of the largest insurance providers. And this notion of having trusted, accurate data, after putting Reltio in, they were able to leverage it in their call center as one of the beneficial outcomes that they were able to get to, where before Reltio, they were doing the first call resolution in 5 to 8 seconds, where the call comes in, they want to route it to an agent, and the agent should be armed with appropriate information. But as you know, in insurance business, everything is about a policy, not necessarily about Neil as a customer, but everything about a policy. So in that 5 to 8 second time frame, the best that they could do is request for a policy number and then have that policy detail populated for the call center agent to talk to the customer with. Versus after putting Reltio in, they were not only able to bring the time down from 5 to 8 seconds to less than 300 milliseconds to do that first call resolution and route it to a specific agent who would be able to respond to the customer, have the conversation with them. But the agent was also armed with not just one policy, but all the different policies across different lines of business that Neil as a customer has. And if other members of the same household have some other policies, that entire set of information was available to them, which radically transformed the customer experience that they were able to deliver. Remember those calls where you get on the 1-800 number or the toll-free call the insurance company, and you're wondering how come they don't know that I have other policies with you as well? Why can't you look up that information? Yeah. So that's the problem that we were able to resolve for them and do it in a much shorter time frame, going from 5 to 8 seconds down to 300 milliseconds or less.
And I suspect for many business leaders listening, they're hearing the ROI, they're hearing about the technology and the impact that it can make, and it feels like a real utopia. But they might be sat there now, still running on outdated, batch-orientated data systems. And for those people listening, what would you say is driving the shift to real-time intelligence? And what are the first step that leader listening can take if they're stuck with legacy platforms and rising technical debt? How can they get out of that? What should they be doing?
So first of all, everybody has legacy debt. Some have larger legacy debt, some have smaller legacy debt. But take a step back from all of that, from the current state, and think about I'll say a few things. I have not met a customer in my life who says, I want my business to move slower, or I want to manage less customers. I want to sell less number of products. Every business has an aspiration to move faster or somehow increase the velocity of their business. With that in mind, now, if you look at the current landscape of how much friction we have in the enterprise space, inside each enterprise environment, and look at the opportunity that is being created with AI for us to move faster and truly do something differentiated, highly tailored, highly personalized, there's a big gap between those two endpoints. And that's the reason why we should be thinking about how to modernize our systems, how to create the capability that serves as a bridge between these two different endpoints, where nobody has a magic button where they can immediately retire all of legacy. But what kind of system or a data information layer you can put in the middle of all this chaos so that you have a rationalized view of the information. And everything new that you're trying to do, whether it is AI or digital transformation or creating new applications, is informed by or built on this unified data and information layer, the real time data intelligence layer. And that's how we've been working with some of the largest companies across financial services, insurance, healthcare, life sciences, manufacturing, retail, to make sure that they are able to create the bridge between the past and the future and operate at a higher clock speed for their business.
And we're talking about legacy tech and technical debt here, but before you came on the podcast today, I was reading that you've also spoken around data debt as well, and how that can be the silent killer of innovation in an age of AI. I suspect that's got a lot to do with it as well, because data AI is only as good as the data that you give it. So how does data debt build up over time, and what's the real cost, both in lost opportunities or operational inefficiencies, maybe?
So, the way we used to build systems in the enterprise, it used to be an application or business process first approach, where think about CRM, ERP, human capital management, all these different types of applications that we have created in the enterprise. But they were there to support a business process. However, the flaw in that thinking was that I create an application. My application has its own data model, has its own data set that it operates on. And now suddenly we have 600 plus different applications. And some companies have 1,000 different applications that they're using on any given day. And each one of them has a copy of their customer information in a discrete, distinct silo. 600 copies of Neil floating around the enterprise. And nobody knows if this is the right version, if this is the trusted version, or the other system has the most accurate detail or most up to date detail. And that becomes a problem. That's the data debt that we are suffering from. And that is why the applications should focus on serving the business process. The data should be a reusable, interoperable asset across the enterprise, and hence the need for the unified data information layer or the real-time data intelligence type of a layer that cuts across all these different silos for customer, product, supplier, asset, location, employee, types of information, so that you have the right, most accurate, up-to-date detail available as a trusted asset that you can plug into every business process, every application. And now think about AI. Everything that you want to do with AI, the benefit and value of AI is not just reinventing the old wheel, but thinking about where AI can deliver maximum value. AI works best if it has multivariate, multi-system type of input, so that it can give you the cause and effect type of correlation and tell you that, by the way, if you're trying to sell something to Neil today, right at this point in time, and he has an issue with an existing product that he has from us, we need to connect the dots and we need to factor that into our discussion. Think about that banking experience where on one hand, you're calling the bank because you have some fraudulent credit charges on your credit card that you're concerned about. On the other hand, you're getting a separate and distinct call from them at the same time, trying to sell you a new credit card or a new type of account or new type of instrument that they want you to buy from them. At the same time, when you're extremely frustrated at that given point in time, and you're like, I'm never going to work with this bank. They don't know how to look at my situation.
And I also think 600 copies of Neil floating around, that sounds the stuff of nightmares right there. But of course, AI models, as I said a few moments ago, are only as strong as the data that they're trained on. So how can companies use resilient data protection maybe to reduce vulnerabilities in their AI initiatives? Anything they should be doing there?
Well, this is where, having not just the trusted data, but the right governance controls around the data. Because as you are leveraging this kind of information for AI type of scenarios or use cases, you need to make sure that the consumers of the capabilities that you will create are not getting access to information that they should not have access to. So the same robust security controls that were applied to previous generation applications also need to be applied to the AI type of applications that we are building. And that's why it's even more important to think about the trusted layer of data that is securely governed and managed and appropriately respecting the different authorizations and authentication protocols as well to make sure the right people have access to the information at the right point in time.
And the role of the data steward has traditionally been seen as more compliance focused. How are you seeing that role evolving into one of the key enablers for AI? And what skills should those modern data stewards develop or be developing that now that role is changing?
Well, data stewards in the past have played a very important role, and I think that they will have a bigger role to play as we move forward. But instead of spending 95% of their time on chasing data anomalies or errors or issues and trying to figure out, which copy of Neil's record is the best version. Let the system handle that capability. Let the AI type of governance mechanisms handle how the life cycle of that data should be managed. And if there are anomalies, how to address those anomalies so that they can free up their time to focus on what is business critical and how they should be supporting the business with the trusted information that they can provide to their business stakeholders and accelerate the pace or the clock speed of the business overall. Remember, I have not met a business that says, I want to move slower. So these are the people who know and understand the data really well, who can now start to accelerate the pace of the business with the new capabilities that they can bring to life, especially by leveraging agentic AI capabilities. And this is the work that we are doing, where a lot of the research, a lot of the enrichment, a lot of the refinement of the information is now being handled by agentic capabilities, which is supervised by humans or data stewards. But at the same time, the time that these data stewards have is now freed up to think about what are the next set of business problems that they want to tackle.
And your platform promises unified, trusted, and interoperable data. And in practice, what does it take to get from siloed, messy data, where many people listening will be right now, to where they need to be? And how long does that kind of transformation usually take?
So this used to be considered very hard, very long projects. Everybody used to think that it would take anywhere from 2 to 3 years to reach that state where they are able to look at the unified view of the data. But now, with the innovation that we have been able to bring to the table, within 30 days, 30, 60, 90-day type of timeframes, depending on, from less complex to the most complex type of variant that we have seen. And these are extremely large businesses that we are talking about at global scale. We are able to stand them up with this kind of information that is then plugged into the various business processes that need to leverage this detail. So it is no longer the multi-year type of a construct for getting these kinds of capabilities deployed. Within a month or two, you can be up and running with this kind of a capability. And that's extremely transformative for the industry.
And as more and more organizations continue to move to real-time cloud-native data platforms, you must have seen a lot of common mistakes during your time. What mistakes have you seen most that could possibly be avoided, that you often see not just derailing, but even delaying some of the benefits? Any big pitfalls or mistakes that you could share and help people avoid today?
Well, one of the biggest ones that I've seen is this desire to boil the ocean.
Yeah.
We want to solve everything in our first release. And that, while it's a great objective, but think about how long you have to wait to factor in everything versus if you took an approach where you took and prioritized the most meaningful, high value type of scenarios, delivered on those first, and then started to solve for the long tail of the use cases that you want to support. That's the approach that we recommend. And there's also a difference as to why we are able to recommend that and support that kind of a journey versus the boil the ocean type of a journey, primarily because the technology is very different. The technology is flexible. It adopts or adapts to the scenarios that are coming up. And that's where having the flexible foundation that you can continue to grow with, iterate with at a much faster rate and pace without having to bring it down or stop it or say we're going to take downtime. What if the system was continuously operating while you were making changes, additions, subtractions? And that's what we have been able to deliver. So that makes it a fundamentally different game in terms of how you can approach these problems, even though they look big as problems to solve, but you can have a very precise, small starting point that you can continue to build with and grow with.
And if we did look into the future, maybe look into my virtual crystal ball, what do you think will be the biggest changes that you expect to see in how enterprises begin to think about and invest in their data strategy? It feels like we're at somewhat of a turning point and that realization and epiphany of sorts. But what are the biggest changes you expect on the horizon?
I think the biggest change in the enterprise data and technology landscape is moving from this application first architectural thinking, where every application is its own architecture and its own data silo, to a data first architecture thinking, where you're thinking about how should we have this interoperable data as the layer between the business processes and the current set of silos so that you're able to think about how to reinvent or reimagine the new way of doing things and able to put that into motion, especially as you start to leverage more of the AI and the agentic future, because that is where the unlock of value from treating data as a strategic asset, as the interoperable asset, is going to be the massive unlock that you'll be able to bring to the table.
And for each individual listening, I think there's a real pressure on every single one of us to be in a state of continuous learning to try and keep up to speed with the pace of technological change. So, from a personal point of view, where or how do you self educate? Any tips you can share on what you do to keep up to speed?
That's a great question, especially with the pace of change that we are seeing. So here's how I look at it. I divide it into concentric spheres. The innermost sphere is the area that I am most interested in, where I am reaching out into different locations, into different publications, to figure out what's the state of the art, what's changing, how it's evolving, so that I can be at the forefront of that thought process. Versus the outer circle is more about information that flows to me just because there are so many conduits, so many different things. And that is more for general awareness. That is an area that is a second order area to keep me informed, but not necessarily the inner concentric circle where I have to be at the leading and the bleeding edge of things. So that's how I divide the world into those two categories. And where do I need to go seek information versus where I need to have information flow to me?
Fantastic. I just love what you're doing there and how you designed that. It's so much food for thought. And for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about Reltio and everything we discussed today, the work you're doing, where's the best starting point for everything?
Well, reltio.com is the best place to go and look us up. And I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, connect with me, and I'm always interested in having a dialogue about talking about what can be done and should be done with data as the strategic asset, and how this gives us an opportunity, especially in the agentic age, to reimagine and reinvent the enterprise of the future.
Well, I will add links to everything, and I would urge everyone listening to check that out, because we did cover a lot today, from how businesses are evolving data management, moving away from outdated systems in favor of real-time intelligence. And it's also great to talk about how to transform AI vulnerabilities with resilient data protection, understand exactly why data debt is the silent killer of innovation, and of course how data stewards, they're the new AI enablers, providing that human guided, explainable and trustworthy data. So much food for thought there. I'd love to hear from people listening what they take away, but just to thank you for starting that conversation today. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Neil. Thanks for having me on the show.
Wow, such a fascinating conversation now. I think gave us all a glimpse into how trusted real-time data is becoming the backbone of modern business and AI adoption. We covered everything from eliminating data debt to protecting AI from vulnerabilities, and even how data stewards are stepping into a new empowering role. But I'd love to hear what you think. Is your organisation ready to treat data as a true strategic asset? Please share your thoughts with me. Let's keep the conversation going. techtalksnetwork.com. You can even leave me an audio message there. Let me know, and I'll get straight back to you. But that is it for today. So thank you for listening as always, and I'll speak with you soon. Bye for now.